found out about an ancient treasure map that had been stolen during a shipwreck. On the way to find a treasure, the crew had saw a tropical storm. They crashed on the coast of Indonesia. The treasure map was taken. We had to find out who took the map. We used CSI and engineering and medicine to solve the case. Now we will have expert groups explain who stole the map.
Action.
The captain shipwrecked, and Dr. Smart noticed that many of the crew members were severely injured with fractures or sprained limbs. In order to help them, we learned about open, closed, simple, and commutative fractures.
I'm gonna explain what you would use to treat a fracture or a broken bone. You would use a splint, and a splint is a piece of hard plastic that you wrap around your broken bone, and it keeps it safe until it heals. Now Hayes is going to demonstrate how to do a splint.
If I have a broken foot, I put my foot in the middle of the splint roll, and then I wrap it around my foot and put the cloth around my foot, and that's called a figure 8. And I'm going to demonstrate. Hold that for a second. And then I would put that cloth right there around here, like that.
Wrap it up and keep it tight.
Yes.
So there was a couple of people hurt on the ship, and so we used those splints to keep their bones in place. And now I'm going to tell you about Chief Stewart's lung problem. So Chief Stewart was experiencing shortness of breath, wheezing, and accelerated heart rate. Dr. Smart thought it was an issue with the respiratory system. To find out that it was happening, or what was happening, we created a model lung to see how the lungs work. We found out she had a collapsed lung and learned how to save her by forcing air into her lungs.
Can you hold the microphone for me? The bottom balloon represents the diaphragm. When you pull on the bottom balloon, the lung inflates. Then when you let go, it pushes the air out of the lung through the trachea.
Two members of the crew, Young and Neff, were lost on the island. Parts of the island were unable to be reached on foot, so we built M-bots to search unexplored areas of the island and bring them back. We hand-built these bots by making sure we had every part, and then we put in wires. We had to attach all of the cords to the motherboard to make it work. The motherboard gets its signals from the remote and tells the other parts what to do.
Well, first off, you have to get Blocky to code the M-bot. Now, you might be wondering why we need to code the M-bot. It's because they need to find Sydney Young on the island. So first you'd learn how to have it be sequenced. Then you'd learn how to drive it. And then you'd learn how to loop it so it would go in circles. And then you learn how to make it stop. And that's what we've been coding, and that's how we've been coding our M-bots.
In the CSI story, there was a storm that caused flooding around the island. We had to make a truss bridge for the M-bots to cross the flooded areas and get back to camp. We made the bridges out of straws and paper clips.
Yes, but these obviously have problems, like so. Paper clips are not that strong, neither are straws. But with right movements, you can bend them into bridges for embots, like so. Really help this one. Now these are connected. Here is an example of a finished product. We use triangles because triangles are very supportive and lay out pressure between all of the lower parts. That is all, and next up is emergency medication B.
This week we learned how to cure a snake bite and dissect a cow heart. It was fun and we enjoyed it very much. While on the way back, Sydney Young got bitten by a snake. We looked at different types of snakes to determine what snake bit her. She gave us clues to help us determine which snake it was, the Malayan pit viper. Its poison affects the blood. That's called hemotoxic. And the other type of venom is called neurotoxic, and it affects the brain and nerves.
Then we figured out what the do's and the don'ts are for a snake bite are.
We did an experiment on what happened when a snake bites you. It's called a blood clot. It can clog up your blood flow and it can lead to a heart attack.
People on the ship were having trouble with their cardiovascular endurance. Dissecting the cow heart can be messy but fun. You can learn a lot about the heart. It may be a little gross, but you can find things you never knew about, like the artery. Once the heart touches oxygen, it turns gray. It's very interesting to dissect a cow heart.
We saw the cow heart. We could see veins and fat in and on it. We saw parts like the right and left rhyme. We learned so many things this week.
Now, here's the blood splatter analysis.
We are the blood analysis. We are part of the forensic science team and we are going to discuss blood splatter analysis. Blood was found at the scene of the crime. Many of the crew members had cuts from the shipwreck. The blood drops were analyzed to determine what height they fell from so we could determine whose blood it was at the crime scene.
The blood splatter analysis is what helped us find out how far up the blood fell from on the ship. Measuring the diameter of the drops and calculating the average sizes of each height. We dropped blood from different heights to see how it affected the splatter. We found out that the blood fell from 30 inches.
Next up is the forensic scientist.
On CSI, we needed to find out whose fingerprints were on the overturned cup found at the crime scene.
We used a sample of the fingerprints on the overturned cup. Then we dusted cocoa powder on the fingerprint, and we put tape over it to get the fingerprint transferred to the paper.
After we transferred the fingerprint, we looked at the different types of fingerprints. There are 3 main patterns, including arches, loops, and whorls.
With the fingerprints we found on the overturned cup, we noticed that the criminal was Dr. Smart.
After looking at the differences between the fingerprints, we noticed that the fingerprints on the cup and on Dr. Smart are both loops.
While we were doing CSI, we had to figure out what this white mystery powder was.
We figured out it was cornstarch. Cornstarch was used for sunburns.
How we figured this out is by testing powders that look similar. We tested powdered sugar, cornstarch, cream of tartar, and baking soda. We mixed these with different liquids to see how they would react.
Neff had a lot of sunburns. It turned out Neff was one of the criminals that stole the part of the map.
In conclusion, Dr. Smart was the criminal. Neff confessed that Dr. Smart persuaded him to steal and hide the map. Sidney Young saw them, and Neff kidnapped Sidney. We found this out by doing a series of work in medicine, CSI, and engineering. We also made a trust bridge and bots to help the crew. We had to use leadership and thinking skills to solve this mystery. It was a shock that it was Dr. Smart, but we had fun solving this mystery at Envision Camp. And I would like to thank all the other groups that went before me.